Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today as we explore our Collaborative Action Grant Program. Just a few things before we get started. Please mute your lines upon entry to minimize any background noise. If you have a question, please type them out in the Q&A section to the right hand of your screen and make sure that it's being sent to all panelists. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. My name is Frederick Sindell, and I am a program associate here on our National Initiatives team here at Enterprise. Our goal today is to introduce our Collaborative Action grants and hear some examples and stories from past grantees. Today we will be joined by Nella Young, our Senior Program Director at Enterprise, who oversees our Culture and Creativity programming, and Emily Roush-Elliott from Delta Design Build in Greenwood, Mississippi. She did one of the first collaborative actions that Enterprise sponsored and is going to moderate a discussion with 3 of our 2017 grantees. Here to talk about their experience with their collaborative action they hosted in their cities are Daniel Greenspan from Bon Secours in Baltimore, Maryland, Ashley Wilson from Detroit Shoreway in Cleveland, Ohio, and Joel Garcia from Self-Help Graphics in Los Angeles, California. First, I will start us off with an overview of the Collaborative Actions grant, the history, and the grant application details before we get into more discussion. Enterprise's Collaborative Action grants provide organizations with $5,000 to build community agency, engage local voices, and connect to long-term community goals. What is a collaborative action? I hope by their name, collaborative actions are self-explanatory. These are projects that include community collaboration at their core. They're small-scale projects that plant or cultivate a seed of possibility. Because they are small grants, we have really seen that they provide enough incentive to move an idea into reality, but they also allow for a sense of experimentation and imperfection. Collaborative actions may be permanent or temporary, tangible or intangible, and may include creative placemaking activities like mapping, art installations, or community events. They are typically small-scale, low-cost, and short in duration, but often fit into a larger community effort or address a broader community need. They can fill a gap that there may not otherwise be time or money to invest in. I will now pass this over to Nella Young, who will share a brief history of the program.
Thanks, Frederick. So Enterprise is a national nonprofit. We work in 10 targeted geographies as well as nationwide, supporting community development organizations with funding and best practices to advance the field. Our founders, Jim and his wife, Patty Rouse, were really sophisticated developers, but they also had this creative spirit, and they always held people at the center of their mission. The heart of the collaborative actions is really about this people-centered partnership, and it's about bringing a creative spirit to collaborating on local projects. So, Frederick, can you advance the slide, will you, or give me the ball?
You should be all set.
Okay. Great, thank you. Cool. So I'm going to share a couple images as I talk about a few examples of past collaborative actions. Really, the background of this program is we started them with a focus on how to help designers leverage their skills to foster love, forgiveness, and compassion in the communities where they worked. So Emily Roush-Elliott partnered with community members in Greenwood, Mississippi to plan a day that celebrated the unique things that they were good at. And Joanne Ware in Seattle worked with hundreds of residents to help fold origami cranes and make an origami graffiti installation that honored a local social justice hero and marked the site so people knew a community development was coming soon. And another great example was in Santo Domingo, New Mexico, where our Rhodes Fellow Joseph Kunkel organized a community heritage walk in collaboration with community members. And they gathered local histories and mapped out a future trail that would eventually incorporate locally made art. So this is just a quick flavor and a little bit of the spirit of the initial collaborative actions, and that they're really founded in a spirit of love and compassion. The experience and the lessons that we learned in that first year are captured in a book that is called Made with Love, and it's available on our website. Frederick will share a link to it a little farther down in the presentation. So that initial round really helped us define this grant program, and since then we've supported more than 35 additional collaborative actions with communities around the country. We really support a range of groups, so some have a lot of experience and others are doing this kind of project for the first time. Some are led by people that really are members of the community that they want to serve, and others are acting as allies or partners to that community. And both of them are a good approach. Some of them are ephemeral and temporary, and others are permanent installations or structures. So just to paint a picture that there's a wide range of what this activities that you want to propose can look like, but there's a certain core spirit of collaboration and creativity behind all of the collaborative action grants. So I hope that that gives you a quick glimpse of what is at the heart of the program and helps you understand how your project or idea can fit. And now Frederick's going to take a little bit of time to talk about some of the more specific details of the grant and the requirements and timing and all of those logistics for this year before we hear from our grantees.
Great, thank you, Nella. At Enterprise, we believe that integrating arts, culture, creativity, and design into community development practice leads to improved outcomes at all levels of a community's well-being. We are working hard to build collective capacity to do this more within Enterprise and our partner organizations. So this year, we will be awarding 20 collaborative actions, that is 10 for each round. The award per grantee will be $5,000, and the period of performance will be 6 months from the grant notification. While organizations from all over the country are welcome to apply, we do prioritize our target geographies. Our target geographies are listed here as well as on our website. Here's an outline of our selection criteria and how proposals will be evaluated. We will be asking for our project description, a community contact and engagement, your communications and outreach plan, and the impact. The project description is really your opportunity to pitch your project and explain how it addresses the needs of the community. Under community contact and engagement, you're going to want to describe the place of this collaborative action and the people involved. It'll be beneficial to know how this project will engage the members of the community. Providing your detailed communications and outreach plan will help us understand how you intend to get people out, and understanding what impact you're expecting to achieve. Proposals will be evaluated on how they advance long-term community goals and meet community needs, deploy creative and collaborative strategies, engage local voices and build community agency, and demonstrate feasibility within the budget and timeline. Here's a rundown of our current timeline for these grants. Currently, round 1 is closed, and we are reviewing those applications as we speak. I wanted to highlight some key dates for the second round of collaborative action grants that were open as of March 12th. The last day to submit will be April 30th, and the finalists will be notified the week of May 25th. You will need to apply online through our SlideRoom platform, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact us through our design inbox. It's design@enterprisecommunity.org. I also wanted to point out some useful inspiration, tools, and resources that you may find helpful as you develop your proposals. First, there are some links in the sidebar of the RFP that guide you to more information and project examples. We also have our Made with Love book that shares 8 case studies of the initial collaborative actions in 2013 to 2014. This was the book that Nella pointed out earlier. These are not only great examples, but include some good advice based on a few difficult lessons learned. They are also a good model for the kinds of impacts these types of projects can have, both small and large in scale. It is available online, and you can also order a printed copy. You just need to follow the link here. Last year's Collaborative Action grantees created community how-to guides that you can also see online. The website's listed here. It's communityhowtoguides.org. There are some really great examples in there of what this year's past grantees have done. So now I'm going to pass this over to Nella to get us kicked off with to introduce Emily. Nella?
Great, thank you. So we hope you all are thinking of questions that you have, and feel free to enter them in the Q&A, and then we'll take a little time towards the end of the session to hear what your questions are. But before we do that, Emily Roush-Elliott is going to moderate a discussion with some of our recent grantees, and here's some more of the stories and the details. It's the good stuff. So I'm really pleased to introduce Emily. She is the social impact architect and co-founder of Delta Design Build Workshop, which is a mission-driven design build firm that focuses on architecture, design, construction, and skill development in the partner communities where they work. Emily's a licensed architect who has worked in Tanzania and in the US, and from 2013 to 2015, she was an Enterprise Rose Architectural Fellow in Mississippi, hosted by the Greenwood Economic Development Corporation and the Carl Small Town Center at the Mississippi State University. She was part of the 8 collaborative action projects that piloted this program, and her collaborative action was Good At Day in Greenwood. It was an event that celebrated the often unrecognized talents and contributions that everyone could bring to their community. So thank you, Emily, and welcome.
Thank you, Nella. And I want to say welcome also to, obviously, the people I'm going to be talking with today, but really to everyone listening, welcome to this space. Collaborative actions are a unique grant, and as Nella said, pretty rare in that we began this conversation years ago focusing on love, compassion, and forgiveness. We now get hundreds of applications every year. There are dozens of you listening in today, and people will be listening in upcoming weeks as this recording will be posted after we're done. So welcome to that. I hope that in itself inspires you. So joining me today, we have 3 people who received this grant in 2017, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves. We're going to have some questions and conversation. We know their projects, their collaborative actions really well, and we're excited to share them with you just to help you get a sense, a 10,000-foot view sense. Daniel, will you start us off with the 1-minute sort of summary overview of what you all did in Baltimore?
Yep. In Baltimore, we wanted to deal with the issue that the community was having with vacant lots and continuing state demolition. So the collaborative action wanted to address what was next for these vacant lots. They had been cleared, and some have been protected from continued illegal dumping. And we wanted to generate more ideas for what could happen for them. Just the normal greening or gardening didn't seem to take hold in the community over the past 20 years. So we thought to add more ideas to the table and then act on those ideas. So we started by kind of just doing small engagement design sessions at kitchen tables and in picnics and vacant lots where we generated ideas in place. And then we shared them at a main event at a kind of at a block party, shared them with the larger community and got further feedback. And then ran a small competition where those who were generating ideas for specific places could see the first phase of those designs implemented, building momentum and sort of changing the perspective of that this was too large a hurdle to overcome.
Thank you. Ashley, will you do the same for us for your project in Cleveland?
Yes. So what we wanted to do with the Colgate Court, Art and Heart on Colgate Court, we wanted to create a space for residents and their children to use for long term. We wanted to make alleyways in our neighborhood feel more welcoming and more safe. We have an extensive alley network in our neighborhood, and we're looking for a way to make those spaces more inviting to residents as meeting spaces and gathering spaces for future events. And so we worked with a local artist, Haley Moore, to create the Art and Heart mural project, which covers the alleyway and the back of the Ripco Studios building here in the southwest quadrant of our neighborhood. Haley Morris is a neighborhood resident. She lives just west of this project. And so essentially the project was her dream to connect with more of her neighbors and really just get to know parts of her neighborhood that she had not particularly visited or wouldn't visit on a daily basis. And through that project, we were able to engage a lot of children and a lot of residents just to, we were able to bring people together otherwise, spaces that they would not normally participate in projects in. And so we were really happy with the outcome and the engagement level.
Thank you. And then Joel, will you just wrap up our intros telling us about your collaborative action in Los Angeles? I'm not able to hear you clearly, Joel. Nella or Frederick, can you hear Joel?
Joel was breaking up a bit. Joel, are you on a cell phone or?
Maybe we could move on to start the conversation and ask Joel to just call back in and see if we can get a fresh connection.
Yes, that would be great. All right, Joel, if you will call in and also speak up when you get into the call so we don't miss out on hearing from you. As we've talked about this collaborative actions, I hope that that collaborative component has really stood out to you because people are what's so important in this grant and hopefully in most of your work. Ashley, I've been really struck by the genuine and personal approach that you bring to community engagement. I hope you'll tell us what techniques did you use in your collaborative action, and if we think of engagement as a recipe, referencing that Made with Love book that Nella mentioned, what is to you an absolutely necessary ingredient for quality engagement?
To answer your first question, some of the methods that we used during this project, we used sort of an untraditional method. We used pop-up barbecues. We would just gather together. We would set up a barbecue. We would set up a table full of snacks, and then we would have music. We would have balloons, just to sort of kind of, even if we're not visible to everyone because we're in an alleyway, you can either smell the food, you can hear the music, or you can see the balloons walking past. So trying to get as much attention brought to the project as possible. We were able to engage with residents that were just passing by. To me, the biggest part or the biggest ingredient that you can have when you're doing a project like this that is collaborative, that is rooted in community engagement is time. To me, making sure that we are taking time to stop what we're doing to engage with residents really being intentional about how we engage with those residents, and using that to build momentum for that project. So for me, it was big to, even while in the midst of painting the ground or power washing the street or doing a cleanup, making sure that if someone walks past me, that I stop and engage with them in any way, in any capacity, to try and get their ideas, get their thoughts, but also get their encouragement, and really just get their confidence, and hopefully engage them more in the project, and hopefully they'll return, hopefully with more people or more children, and a lot of the times that did happen. You would find parents returning with their children and their cousins and nieces and nephews, and grandchildren, really, to participate in the alley painting. So it was really big for us to make sure that we take our time, and understanding that the engagement piece is the biggest portion of this project.
Joel and Daniel, both of your collaborative actions were engaging with the community at two scales. One that was a smaller scale and intensive, and another that was really about getting that message out to a broader audience of people who encounter or interact with a space, but maybe don't live right next to it or aren't spending time doing construction on that site. Daniel, will you start us off, and then hopefully Joel will join back in, talking about the engagement techniques you used and how you connected with people differently at those two different scales.
Yep. The project started off with a core group of individuals, of residents, at really 6 different locations, and we started that by just having one-on-one conversations, like I said before, just around a kitchen table. But we then branched out a bit farther to view it as one block at a time. So in each place we would do door knocking, flyers, sometimes just hang out and be seen, maybe cleaning up or building something small on the space, and engage in conversation with those that came over. And then we would then get together as a group, sort of as a larger coalition between these 6 blocks and 6 locations. And we had these picnics in the spaces where we would talk about group plans and what's up next and just get to know each other. And at those, we started to invite city officials, partners at other nonprofits, or people in the city doing similar work in other neighborhoods. So that became a way to get the word out. And then we took a little bit farther and did some facilitation training for residents around sort of design, interviewing, and asking people what they'd like to see in space and trying to generate other possibilities. And so we did that facilitation as a small group and then used it in a large block party at one of our pop-up parks, where they led those conversations with those who participate in the pop-up park.
Joel, do you have your perspective to add to that question?
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
You're a little bit quiet, but much clearer than last time.
Okay. So to recap really quick, our project really focused on information, and we saw that the community of Boyle Heights and East LA were being given misinformation either through the media, social media, and for us, we see that flow of information to be vital in community building and collaborative action. And so for us, being an arts organization that focuses on printmaking and has used political posters as a way to advocate for many, many issues, we thought that this was an opportunity to partner with some of our longstanding organizations, like the National Day Laborers Organizing Network, which focuses on vulnerable populations like day laborers, hotel workers, and undocumented folks in the workforce. And so with them, we created a poster that clearly articulated the rights that migrants have. And so that was step one, right? Diluting or distilling information clear enough so that any passerby can grab the poster, read it, and know what their rights were. And so then we brought in our youth printmaking team that also consisted of a few artists who are undocumented. So for us, it was really important that they play a vital role because a lot of times it's their parents, their relatives who are impacted by this fear, right? By this trauma that's caused through the news, through social media, and by centering on them and having them be the ones going out to the community and engage, we thought that it created this bridge that was one-to-one. It wasn't an organization, it wasn't an entity that they might not be familiar with, but it was a space that they can totally relate to. And what that did was, when you see a teenager printing an Know Your Rights poster out in the street and handing it out to community members, as an adult, it impulses you to want to jump in, support, and engage. And so that's what happened. Some of the residents that were walking by assisted in distributing the posters to local businesses, to one another. And we did about 5 of these actions through the 6 months. What happened in the middle of all that, Trump was working to rescind DACA. And so the LA Times caught wind of what we're doing, and it made its rounds through the LA Times and through social media as well. That's something that we didn't expect because what we wanted to do was focus on busy intersections where folks are coming and going from work. But the moment that it hit something like the LA Times, then the churches around the area started reaching out to us. The student centers around the area, like at Cal State LA, started reaching out to us, and folks were coming by asking for these Know Your Rights posters. And that's kind of what happened, right? We focused on these intersections and it created this ripple effect. And to this day, we're continuing this project because even though it's such a simple process, it's had a long-lasting effect. And for us, these collaborative actions, it's what's important, right? What's the issue, and after we're done, what's the lasting impact? Does it last 2 months, a year or longer than that? And we're seeing that these posters have gotten a lot of traction and a lot of legs and continue to do some service.
Great. I'm glad you brought up unexpected things that happen. You mentioned the sort of threat to DACA that came up and gave you some surprises. It sounds like both positive and negative. Overall, you spun it to be something quite positive, I think, in terms of drawing attention to the important work you're doing. Joel, did you have any negative surprises throughout this collaborative action? And if you did, how did you deal with them?
The capacity issue, to respond to the needs, at one point felt a little overwhelming because we just couldn't keep up with the demand. Thankfully, because of the coverage from the LA Times and because of some of the work that we do parallel to this, the California Endowment came in and gave us additional funding to continue the project up until this coming August. So since then, we've done, I believe, another 3 or 4 of these pop-ups in different parts of Boyle Heights and East LA. So yeah, it's about being prepared. It's about knowing what the issue is and how to continue to support it. What allowed us to do that is taking what was a general immigration Know Your Rights poster and branched it off into a poster that addresses, this basic immigration Know Your Rights stuff, but incorporating stuff within the school system, right? How do undocumented students, what rights do they need to know that they're accountable to? We've done one that's aimed at undocumented tenants, so that they're not being harassed or displaced by their landlords. And we're working one with Know Your Rights information, but as well as we're working with a wellness group that would also have a recipe for calming teeth to deal with an encounter with ICE or something of that nature. So it's kind of grown a little, which is great. So that demand, we're able to find support and keep it going.
Yeah, that is a wonderful surprise. Daniel and Ashley, I'd like you all to respond to that same question about surprises, both encouraging and challenging. What were some that you encountered, and how did you deal with those? How about Ashley?
So some of the challenges that we encountered, some of them were, there's a range of things that were surprising during this process. Some were from the area of business owners, some were from residents, some were from random properties nearby. So we had a pretty wide range of different things happen during this process. The first thing for me was we had a lot of in our alleyways. The alleyways can be blighted. There's a lot of dumping in the alleyways. So we worked very closely with an organization called Needs Cleveland to change the structure on some of their food giveaways and how they do their food pantries, so that folks weren't discarding food that they didn't want, but instead were getting the food that they needed. And so that sort of helped with it helped combat a lot of the debris in the alleyways. The second thing that we encountered was a language barrier, which a lot of our residents in the southwest portion of our neighborhood speak, 3 different languages. Some speak Spanish, some speak Swahili, some speak French. We have a very large refugee community, some from Congo, some from Puerto Rico. So we have a lot of refugees coming into the area, and so we ran into the barrier of being able to communicate with a lot of the children over there, and so we wanted to communicate in a way to let them know that it was a comfortable space for them to be in, and so that we could obviously get to know them and they get to know us and know our faces, and so we can work with them in the future. And so for us, it was important that we were able to break down those barriers by using art. And a lot of the artwork that you see in these photos was created by a lot of the children that we encountered during that time who don't speak English. But we were able to help and assist them with their images and what they wanted to put on the alleyway. And we found that they loved it, and we felt a mutual understanding with each other, and we were able to grow without necessarily using words.
Awesome. I think of your organization specifically when some organizations ask us about that sort of creative component that's required. They say, well, we're not an arts organization, and some can be intimidated by that. But I think Detroit Shoreway, through this project, really showed how you can partner with an artist, and then how that really leveraged and elevated the engagement that you all completed. Daniel, will you tell us about challenges, both challenges, surprises, good and bad, that you encountered during your collaborative action?
Yeah, at that moment I was referring to when we started organizing or reaching out at the block level from the core group of individuals who wanted to see something happen different with these lots. Reaching out to the block level proved to be pretty difficult, and for some residents who had been in this neighborhood for 40 years even, they were surprised by how how little commitment we were getting from other individuals. So part of it, we had to ask, well, are we even going in the right direction? The other piece was also to set our own boundaries and know that most of the pushback we were getting was people didn't believe that a space, that the lot, if you did anything to the lot, it would just bring more negative outcomes. So we just had to take a leap of faith and set a boundary around the work we were doing, which is we were sort of dreaming together and testing out these ideas and seeing if they can work, and if they don't, adjusting. So part of the compromise there became doing more, well, we'll put out a table, let's say, and if it starts to create problems, then we can easily remove it and sort of do more temporary stuff. And also part of it was to just, with whoever was showing up to the meetings, to just move forward and kind of get rid of this made-up idea of what a quorum was and what enough participation was as we did this on each block.
Yeah, I think that stood out to me about your report even more than your application, because you didn't know exactly what would happen, and we welcome that in this program. But you didn't have huge numbers of engagement. You know, sometimes that is the metric that people look for. They have 1,000 people attend an event, or other times we see collaborative actions that result in 4 or 8 people getting a training that really allows them to continue other work after the grant, and both are equally exciting. So I want to keep talking about impact for a minute. Daniel and Ashley, both of your projects have a nice sort of balance that you have both some tangible and visible change happening within a physical space. But you've also talked about shifts in perspective of those places and how people think about the places that you're working. Can you just talk a little bit more about some of the intangible impacts that you saw take place, or that you're still hoping are coming any day now, or maybe even 5 years down the road? How about back to you, Daniel?
Yeah, well, I asked that one comment from a pastor we worked with always strikes me. He said that he saw a reverse of apathy with lots of the people on the block that he had engaged with through this process, which was really powerful, and that stuck with us with all the work we keep doing. That, and so the forms that take is one just sort of spiritual and emotional, thinking that something is possible, but it also started to develop capacity and knowledge with the residents of how to navigate some of these processes with the city, with regulations, with kind of project management, and started instilling that ability to have a say in what the direction of their block is. When before those things were sort of opaque, we had to learn by trial and error how to figure out the best way for those pathways to work for us in these situations. So some individuals who weren't really in a leadership role in the community have started to attend, are starting to attend meetings, have been appointed to some leadership groups, and that's just an amazing uplift of confidence for certain people.
Fantastic.
And also put the city on notice, which was really great. That people can want something, but when we started doing it, the city then they believe it, want it.
Awesome. That's amazing impact. Ashley, how do you feel about that same question about beyond this really visible impact that you all made? What are some of those intangible impacts that you're seeing come to fruition or hoping come to fruition?
I think the biggest thing for us is going back there in a few months to continue this project and expand on this project. We're hoping to find that people are still using this space as a place to gather. We're hoping that people are still using this space as sort of a means to get through the neighborhood. We wanted to make the alleyway more walkable, and I feel like this is a good step in the right direction to make this alleyway that covers basically the entire stretch or end of our service area a more walkable one, where folks can go and look at this amazing art created by these residents and the children that live here. Down the line, we're hoping that we can continue to preserve this space as a space where folks can come to revisit again and just think about the process that took place during that time and how those relationships were built. We're extremely grateful to have built amazing relationships with the neighboring residents that live adjacent to the alleyway. We were grateful to be able to solve a lot of their issues, but worked closely with them to make sure that the vision for this was just as strong as something that they wanted to see as well. And so we're excited to go back in the spring this year to continue to expand on this project.
Wonderful. Joel, I think that your organization did work that, you know, on the surface is really, it's temporary and it's not tangible except in these posters that you hold. But I loved how you talk about space during the project and creating safe spaces. I think to help sort of take us back to the beginning before you applied for this grant, or maybe while you were applying for this grant, probably like so many of the people listening today are in the process of writing up their idea. How did you know that this is what was needed, that the community that you work with or are a part of needed exactly the things that you had proposed and that you've done through collaborative action?
I think that's the first point of departure, right? As an artist, as sometimes an organization, we have a certain position where we enter an idea, right, or where we enter a process. And for self-help, one of the things that's been truly important from the beginning has been centering community at the core of the art process. So one of the things that you know that kept coming up in the different activities that we did throughout throughout Boyle Heights and East LA was the delivery of information, or the delivery of correct information. We are a organization that is part of a larger collaborative, which is called the Building Healthy Communities. And through that, we've made the case that art is a healing mechanism, and that in order to have a community that's well, it also needs that creative process to be included in that. And so one of the strategies that we use to do this is like the basic each one teach one, right? Popular education strategies. And so when issues like this come up for us, they don't come up in a way that we're very disconnected from. We have a core group of artists that we meet with monthly, and so these issues will come up in those spaces. And although we have a physical building here, we know that it's difficult for some folks to get in, either youth because of crossing different gang territories, adults either not having the proper documentation to drive, or just to, for citizenship status. So we really made a concerted effort to figure out ways to go out to them. And that's
wonderful.
And that's only really possible for us if at every given point where we, like whatever community or space we enter, we create that space with them. And it's just from space to space. It might look different at a park than it does at a community center, than it does at a corner intersection in front of a business. And so it's really hard as an artist to disconnect from the outcome of that artistic process and shift to being a conduit of that artistic process. So for us,
great. I think that's such a lesson for all of our applicants to learn and to take away. Maybe they already know it, but to take away from this call is that what you're describing is something that I think, because this is a very competitive funding opportunity, something that we see that elevates applicants to that top of the pile is when the engagement is happening or the collaboration is happening all along the spectrum of your work. And so you're saying we collaborated and engaged to even know what was needed, what to write in this application. We're collaborating on a specific action through this collaborative action, and then it's going to continue. There's going to be opportunities for community leadership even after this specific project is done. Those are where we see applications really rising to the top. We only have about 1 more minute of conversation, and I want to direct this last question to Daniel. Just one sort of additional thing that also helps applications rise to the top is when we see that the 5,000, it's not that much. It's not enough to build a house that someone's going to move into and live in. And it's not enough to work on a project for years, but it's enough to take some risks. It's enough to do things a little bit differently than you typically do. And that's something else that we really look for in these applications. If you're saying we have this amazing program and it costs us $200,000 a year, will the collaborative action support $5,000 of it in 2018? It's not a great fit. That $5,000, we want it to be something special that allows you to push the boundary. So if that same program you were saying, we want to do this test and spend more time with the community in a creative way to understand how we could improve the program, that would be something much more likely to be funded. But so Daniel, I think that your collaborative action shows that. How did the $5,000 allow you to work differently than you do on a typical project or a typical day-to-day?
Yeah. So Bon Secours was already involved in cleaning vacant lots and leaving them just as those passive resources. So the collaborative action allowed us to prototype and test and new ideas and what can happen next for these vacant lots. So we were able to experiment with something that wasn't yet a program yet, which would sort of be like of this park system or park network. And it allowed, for myself and my role, to be a little bit of a mediator between what's percolating up from the ground and bring that back to those who are working in that office setting, building programs that sometimes try to find spaces where they're needed. We were able to connect the dots from what's percolating at the bottom to what the funding should be directed towards.
Great, thank you. So we have about 14 minutes left on our call, and I want to look at our questions. Looks like we have 6 questions so far. One of them is, can we use a financial sponsor if we do not have 501c3 status yet? And the answer is yes. Certainly apply with your fiscal sponsor and list them in the application. Then we have a question for Ashley. Were the pop-up barbecues also part of the grant itself, or were they funded separately?
The pop-up barbecues were funded through the grant. They were not a part of the initial grant application, and it's because it was under community engagement. So that could mean a multitude of things. We did door knockings, we did cleanups, we did flyerings, we did a multitude of things to get community engagement, and the pop-up barbecues were a part of that process.
Great, thank you, Ashley. And then we have a question for Daniel. Nadia says, can you expand a bit on the different types of temporary installments you tried using to engage your community? Were these temporary installations reflective of the ideas that were being generated by community members?
Yeah, all the ideas would come out of conversations or meetings, and we sort of didn't build any stop gaps of what we would try, what we wouldn't try. If it was an idea that was worth trying, so therefore it needed to be done quickly and cheaply. That's how we had to do it. So one of the ideas that came out was a horseshoe pit, and ideally we build a permanent horseshoe pit which also acts as a barrier. But the first day we just found rebar and worked really inefficiently to get it in the ground, and we had a horseshoe pit tested there. Another idea that would come up a lot was playing with water or water parks that are closer to the neighborhood than existing ones. That's a big, expensive proposition, but we just went out and got kind of steel conduit and hooked it up to a residential hose and built a little like art sculptural water supply or water fountain, and that can be moved from space to space. Those are some examples and how we did a very basic DIY version. So the craft set it apart from being just something cheap.
Great, thank you. We have a question that I think is for Nella or Frederick. Will your target geographies take precedent over promise zones?
I'll take that one. This is Nella. Yeah, you should mention if you're in a promise zone, but our target geographies are based on where our local market offices at Enterprise are located, and we have a lot of existing relationships, and so those are the priority areas, but we always fund a number of groups that don't necessarily fall in our markets. In particular, we love to hear from rural and Native American groups that don't fall in our markets, but absolutely happy to see you come in if you're from other parts of the country. But yeah, those are based on our local offices, and if you are in a promise zone, you should just mention it in the community context, because obviously those are also a nice priority, but they're not we're not organized around that.
All right, those are all the questions that I see. I think one last thing that stands out to me is that we have such a range of projects that we only want to have about 3 people on this call to not overwhelm the listeners with many different projects. But one thing that we don't have represented on this call is that we often see collaborative actions come in that maybe are a piece of a development or some other long-term project. And while all 3 of these that we've discussed today are keyed into other projects, they're not, say, for example, a public space within an affordable housing development. And that's something that we see a lot, and we often get the question, how does that work with the budget? So if you have other funding sources and this $5,000 is a piece of a bigger pie, we just ask that you really clarify how the $5,000 will be used, both in terms of the activities, the schedule, and that funding specifically. If you have a $100,000 budget and you write in all of the things that will be used on, but don't clarify that $5,000, that reflects negatively on the application when people are reviewing it. That's the last thing that I have to say. Yeah,
I see one more question came in just about the target zones being more broken down further. We don't actually have target neighborhoods within our priority geographies. As I mentioned, our local market offices are real partners in the selection process, and this is a great opportunity for them to both support partners that they know and know will do a good job, and also to maybe get to know new organizations that they haven't worked with. So so there's no particular focus neighborhood in New York City, and some of our offices are based in cities, but they're regional. So like our Atlanta office has a Southeast focus and includes even down to Miami. So you can look on our website if you want to know a little bit more about how each of those markets is organized, and that's how we're getting guidance on which places to focus.
I think we have another question that Nella or Frederick can take. Does the $5,000 have to be applied to the grant period specifically? Could it be used as a reimbursement for expenses that occurred before the grant period if it is part of a larger project?
I would say, go ahead, Frederick.
Sorry. I was just going to say that, yes, it does have to be used within the grant period, but we have had experiences where that may not have panned out in the end. So it really is specific to what the situation is. Do you have more to elaborate on that, Nella?
No, I think, yeah, sometimes we're willing to make little exceptions for things that make sense, but as a rule, you should try to be using the funding for activities during that period of performance.
We have a question that says, a project I want to apply for relates to aging in poverty and working with area artists to portray elders in a senior community to raise awareness. Does this sound eligible?
Sounds great to me. I think
so also.
Emily emphasizes how the nature in which you're working with the groups that you're that you're partnering with is as much a part of it as the thing you're planning on doing. So, you know, and even if you're not in a targeted geography, I wouldn't rule yourselves out. And having a specific focus on seniors is actually something we don't see quite as many applications around that particular target population. So that would also probably take notice, you know, and give you a good chance. One of the things I'll also say, we were just working with our review committee the other day on the first round. And if you submitted in the first round, you're welcome to submit again in the second round. But we get more applications, more amazing applications than we can fund. So in the selection process, what we really do is try to find a range of types of organizations, types of projects. You've heard a lot of description of the kind of range of projects, you know, events, built projects, different kinds of communities and geographies. So when we do the selection, because we cannot select everyone that would be a great collaborative action grantee, we end up selecting a cohort that has a range of diverse projects and diverse groups it's working with. So that is part of the factor that we take into account. So, you know, if you have something that you're doing that you think is unique and special, you have a good chance.
Exactly. If people have follow-up questions after this call, who should they reach out to?
Frederick.
Yeah.
Yeah, Frederick and I are happy to get on the phone if more questions come up and they need further discussion, or we can just have a little email exchange, but Frederick's the main point of contact.
And I have my information up on the slides now, so you guys can all jot it down.
Perfect timing. We got one more question that just came in. Can the funds be used for a one-time event?
Yes, absolutely.
I would go back to what Mela just said, yeah, that I think it's about both the activity you're proposing and also how you're partnering with the community. And if you feel like you are collaborating and elevating some local needs and elevating voices that typically aren't elevated and excited about it, you have a good chance.
And a one-time event that is maybe building connections that will be beneficial in the long run in the context of some change or pressure or issue going on in your community is something that we've seen is a really wonderful use of these funds. So it's just often to say that it's within a larger context that we really see that a small effort and even a one-time event can have a really lovely ripple effect.
We have another question. Can part of the $5,000 be used to pay artists? Certainly some of it can be used for materials, but can it be specifically for artists, I think is a really big yes. We hope so. Yep. We see that a lot. This is a grant that has a lot of freedom compared to some others that I've received in the past. I think one thing you want to stay away from is administrative expenses or I think that's the main one. You want to stay away from administrative expenses. I think, you know, as we said, we want this to feel like something special that allows you to step outside of the way that you're normally working. And so that's why admin and things like that are not going to be bonus points in any sort of application. I don't see any other questions. Mela, Frederick, Daniel, Ashley, Joel, anything? We have about 1 minute left.
I guess I'll just end the call by saying thanks to everyone. Thank you for the great questions. Thank you to Emily and the panelists for your stories and comments. I feel like there's just so much richness to dig into, and I love hearing how these grants play out around the country. If you're applying for the grant, we're really looking forward to reading your project proposals, and as we mentioned, you can check out the website and the RFP, and feel free to reach out to us with your questions. We're very friendly and happy to help give you guidance if you feel like you need it, and we will see you on Slide Room in the next month or so. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.